I'm a former technical recruiter turned software engineer, and I run a careers network. So what I'm going to do today is just basically, it's going to be a fairly informal session about how you can kind of get the job offer in the first place anyway, and then negotiate the salary, but also as well explain how salary negotiation doesn't have to be this like crazy, like Succession-esque, Wolf of Wall Street-esque like battle. It doesn't have to be like that, and I'm going to show you basically how we can help. So just before we get started, Hannah, if you could potentially switch me over to host just so I could screen share, just so I can get the presentation, and then we should be good to go. Alrighty, can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Brilliant, good stuff. Right. So yeah, as I said, my name's Cameron, founder of Code Career. And yeah, a bit about me. So I'm a former technical recruiter. So I started working for agencies. So as a third party, I would basically find people for a job and get paid a fee, kind of for the introduction. So that's a different style of recruitment, really, to the usual one where you're working inside a company. Later on, I ran like a one-man consultancy. I would go into startups and help people hire for their roles. So I taught myself how to code in the evenings. So I knew I wanted to learn to code after speaking with my candidates and understanding that this is something I should really consider getting into. So I used like free online resources, made so many mistakes as everyone does, but eventually managed to crack the code, no pun intended, and get my first job as a software engineer. So I've been doing that for about 3 years now. Not quite actually, but almost. We'll round up. So I run the Code Career, which is how most of you will probably have come across me if you've heard of me before. That's a careers network. So we basically help technical people like break into the industry first and foremost, help them level up, and help them stand out as well. So we run a podcast, TikTok account, which has been an interesting experience. And then as well, we're building a jobs board as well, which hopefully will be a very frictionless way to get a great job in tech. My website link is at the end of the presentation, but it is also Linktree, the Code Career, or thecodecareer.com. But I'll ping that over to you afterwards. Let's basically just jump straight into before negotiations. So the first point I want to make is it's really important to remember that, not just for a technical role, but any job application is a two-way process. Remember to go in the mentality of you're assessing the company as much as they're assessing you. You know, it's not the Victorian era anymore. We're not having to go for a desperate job at a factory, and have to deal with brutal working conditions because we've got no choice in the matter. We're lucky enough to live in a world and in the West and live in a work in an industry where there's a fairly large amount of companies to choose from. So remember, you're assessing the company as much as they're assessing you, and that will also as well, I think, if you go in with that mentality, that will also help nerves a little bit. Like, I'm not trying to say like you're never going to have any nerves. Of course you have nerves. Everyone does. It's totally human. And if anything, if you don't have any nerves at all going in, then you're probably you're probably a little bit too overconfident, which can come with its own problems. And sorry if anyone can hear my cat. He's trying to get in the room. So what I always want to talk about as well, like, set your expectations super early and be honest with the initial recruiter contact. So what I mean by that is whether that recruiter is internal or external, whoever's making that introduction, you need to be honest with them and say, this is kind of what I want. And really, they're not doing their job if they don't ask you that, but there's a good chance they won't. So and kind of be firm with that, because sometimes recruiters will say, but it's a really good job, but you should take this. And you just need to make sure that they know, because really otherwise you're just going to end up wasting each other's time. So again, beforehand as well, you should keep a brag document. So what I mean by brag document is basically list out your biggest achievements so far. So this is also really good for helping defeat imposter syndrome. So for those who aren't familiar, imposter syndrome is the idea that you feel like you don't belong because you think you're not good enough and you think everyone else is better. Now I can tell you that's probably the most common feeling in tech there is. I get it all the time still to this day. Literally today at work, I was struggling with some like DevOps related tasks, and I found it really difficult. And I really felt imposter syndrome. So I felt like, someone on my level should understand that. It's totally normal. having some kind of brag document and a record of how far you've come is really important. Just not just for confidence, but then also as well for justification down the line. Obviously, don't like slap out this brag document on the initial call and just say like, this is why I deserve X money on the initial call. But it's just really good to keep that in mind, and also it's just as well handy to have one, just have an idea of what to talk about. So also as well, you can actually find a lot of salary data online. I was considering putting Glassdoor as a resource here, but I decided not to, because I do find that Glassdoor is the data on there is somewhat inaccurate a lot of the time. I've decided to only include blind or levels.xyz. So I think Levels is mainly American. They have some London-based jobs, but Blind has a lot in the EU. So you can sign up to both those platforms and like check out kind of what existing people are paid. So you know that basically you're not getting shortchanged. A lot of the time, these companies as well make their bandings public, so you don't even have to do the hard work of searching for all of this. And there's definitely a big movement towards that as well. A brag document, is that similar to resume? Yeah, so similar-ish, but this is more of like informal notes of like examples of where you've done really well. So for example, my CV might say, oh, I worked at Facebook. I didn't, but I worked at Facebook for 2 years, and I worked at Google for 2 years, and these are the projects. Whereas the brag document, it would be informal, and I'd go into detail on like really challenging situations. It's also really handy as well to answer interview questions, so not just for salary justification. The mentality as well. So also as well, feel free to ask questions. I was just answering a question in the chat there. So I want to talk a bit about the mentality. And as you can see, I've got a picture of Leonardo DiCaprio depicting Jordan Belfort. And the reason why I put that is because a lot of people seem to think you need to be like really salesy and pushy here. But I like totally disagree with that. And if anything, particularly for technical roles, it's going to really put recruiters off you. So actually the mentality you require is like pragmatism and rationality. And I mean rationality in terms of like scientific. You need to just think about like, why do I add this? What do I do? And just think about like the commercial value add that you have. Like there's no need to like try and like think about like outwitting someone or aggressively trying to assert yourself. Like it does no one any favors, and like most people in the technical industry, we're not like that. And we'll leave that to the stockbrokers. So if it helps you, to frame the mentality on the value add, you can frame yourself as a one-person consultancy. So I mentioned earlier about how back when I was a recruiter, I became a one-man consultancy for a while. So I'd go into companies and I'd charge them a fee to basically work for their company, hiring software engineers for them. And I would charge like either a monthly or daily rate, depending on what I did. So what I would think about is, I think, what's the value I can add here? How much recruitment fee can I save them? And what saving can I pass on to them? But therefore as well, make a profit for myself. So think of yourself as a one-person consultancy business. If you were a one-person software engineering house, then how much would you charge and why? And what would be your justification? So that can really help. And as I said at the bottom, always just consider the value add to the company. And a lot of people confuse value add with just straight up being like net profit. It's not just that. You've got to think about intrinsic things as well. So as well as obviously, you could say something as simple as saving money on cloud fees, but you could also say as well, things that will bring the team closer together or improve ways of working. So I know many of us on this call are careers changers, and that's particularly something you can really lean into. So if you've worked some kind of previous career, I think a lot of people would talk the imposter syndrome here, because I felt like this. I was competing against computer science graduates for that first job, and I felt kind of inferior to them. But actually, if you can draw on your previous experience and use examples from your previous career, that can give you a USP, so a unique selling point versus other technical people, then that can actually really help with salary negotiation and add, I don't want to say that a human has a price, but it will add value to you in that role compared to other people. So for example, if we're talking down the line, you want to get into mentoring, perhaps if you have some kind of background in education before you switched over, which is quite a common path. You could talk about your background in education and the skills you picked there to use as a mentor down the line. So I know a few people that have gone from sort of jobs in teaching, for example, that have been able to really draw on that and prove that would mean they'll be a good mentor, and therefore if you're a good mentor, you're usually a good manager. So that's as an example, but there's plenty of different things you can use for that. Like I know all sorts of people from all sorts of backgrounds that have transitioned into this career and used their previous experience for lots of different justifications, and it could literally be anything. So really have a think about it and don't be afraid to think outside the box. So once you get into the actual conversation, just something I want to note on is not giving up your current salary. I'm not saying recruiters have your worst interests at heart or anything like that. That's not, like, we've heard the phrase, I'm sure, unconscious bias. You can almost have a version of that set in with the recruiter once they hear your current salary, because they'll start assessing you at a lower level if that salary is lower than expected. So I can't think of the right word for it, but it is an unconscious judgment almost on someone if they come in at a lower salary. And as I say in the second point here, your old salary, it's totally irrelevant, right? It's what a previous company assessed you at, and their judgment. So they think they thought you were at a lower salary. Maybe that was a fair judgment at the time, maybe not. If it was an unfair judgment, then it's even more unfair in the new job, because you're being judged with your old skills, which already had an unfair price tag, so to speak. What to do if they insist on knowing the old salary? How to proceed on that? Well, first off, to be honest, I would think that's a bit of a red flag. And I probably wouldn't be too keen on proceeding with a company who is desperate to know my old salary. If it's an agency recruiter, I would just straight up drop the agency recruiter. There's no need for them to know that, and chances are they're just using it as leverage. I can see there's a hand up as well. Would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Annika. I'm attending Code Clan here in Edinburgh, and I'm in week 13 now of 16 weeks of the software development course. And there's only that much I've learned so far, like Python, JavaScript, React, MongoDB, etc. And before that, I worked for the NHS in an administrative role. Obviously, that salary was lower than what I can expect now. How would you recommend to go ahead with negotiation as a newbie in tech and career when I start all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good point. And, I would, whilst previous salary isn't really relevant for anyone, but especially in a case like yours, where you were previously working in a totally different industry, and chances are you're probably going to go and work in the private sector. So that's another huge transition where it's a public sector salary versus private. So what I would do there is explain, I would basically say, like, just for you, try and think of it almost like you're like graduating university or leaving school again. That's what I tried to do when I left. I tried to think, right, I'm on a completely new track here. Like it's my old career is totally irrelevant in that respect. So that's probably the best way of doing it. And I would say in your case, because you're kind of scoping out a new market, right? Do as much market research as possible, and then target and then target your salary at that. I also live in Edinburgh, so I can actually tell you the going rate for a junior. If you can get 30 plus, basically is roughly what you can be looking at, potentially more than that as well at some of the banks that are over by the airport. So there's some local knowledge for you. So definitely check out some of those. And
30K, even though I'm only just graduating in 4 weeks.
It's possible. There will be some ones below that, but I mean, there are definitely people making 30K straight out. I've been sharing some resources for jobs in the Central Belt of Scotland on my Discord as well. So there'll be a link for that at the end, and feel free to join that if you're not in it already. And we're sharing some links on there.
Cool, thank you.
No worries. So basically, that brings on quite nicely, actually, to where we want to go next, and that is establishing from the employer what range they're looking at. So the employer will have a budget in mind for the job. They might try and tell you it's open-ended. It's not true. There's a budget there. So you're going to try and find out what budget they have, because if it's a startup, there's maybe a budget. If it's a larger company, it's a banding. So what do I mean by that? The startup will have X amount of money left aside to say, okay, we need one more engineer. I've got 45K. And they're going to try and basically, it's like a hard cap of 45K, and there won't be this structure around it. So actually, a lot of the time, you're going to have much more advanced negotiations with startups. So particularly if you end up working for a startup, a lot of these tips will be more relevant. The larger the company, typically less you negotiate. The next point is about bandings. And I talked about the public sector a few minutes ago. And actually, particularly for anyone that has worked in the public sector before, you'll know all about this. They're very clear on bandings in the public sector. And a lot of large tech companies now have clear bandings. Sometimes they're totally clear internally. Sometimes they're clear internally and externally. So try and ask the recruiter about bandings. So like any company with more than 20 developers will be using a banding, because otherwise it's a complete HR nightmare, and you can end up with all kinds of problems if each person is negotiating individually. So just make sure you're being assessed at the right band, and that can be very specific. So I think literally in my current one, I'm a mid banding. So it can be they can drill down really specific, and I've heard some tech companies have up to 15 bands. So, it can be a few K, but, a few K is a lot after tax each month. So definitely worth trying to push the upper end of the banding if you can, or even go up a banding if you feel that you justify that. So I want to talk about pushbacks, because this isn't a dream scenario. Like, obviously, sometimes recruiters are going to be difficult and push back on you because it's partially their job, right? They ultimately they need to get the job filled at a lower rate. Like, they're not going to completely mess with people because that completely ruins their brand. But they still want to push down the salary a little bit most of the time. So remember, negotiations shouldn't be synchronous. What do I mean by that? Synchronous would just be like a phone call, meeting, video call. Asynchronous is email, basically, or letter if we're being a bit more old-fashioned. So if someone tries to negotiate with you in person on the phone, I would really strongly advise not to. I would really avoid doing that. Negotiating by email is much easier because it gives you the time to think about it. If you've got someone on the phone, then you could, if you end up getting tangled up a bit, you could agree to something that you later regret in terms of like salary or bonus package or anything like that. So I would definitely try and if they try and push you a bit, to say, look, I want to think about it, and then try and do it over email. But particularly the external recruiters love the phone. So just try and get them off the phone if you can, because nothing really good comes of a live negotiation. In my experience, it can be quite tricky. I think the best negotiations I've had have been just via email, and that's the best way to do it. And you shouldn't also be afraid to ask why they're resisting. Like, is it a budgeting issue, banding issue? Like, why do they assess you at a lower banding than maybe you want to be at? Is there anything preventing you? So there could be all kinds of things. Like, you could even ask, like, what do I need to do to reach this higher banding? Like, is there a skill I need to do? Like, let's use a random technical example. Let's say, hypothetically, I don't know TypeScript, and I'm interviewing for a job, and they say, Cam, JavaScript, that's great, but we can't give you the full you want 40K, but we're only going to pay you 35 because we really need someone who knows full TypeScript. So if I said, if I learn TypeScript and I can prove that I can work in TypeScript over next month, would you be willing to consider moving me up to the 40? So, never be afraid to ask things like that. The worst they can say is no, right? They're not going to rescind a job offer if someone shows that they're keen to learn a new skill, are they? So if anything, it's a positive. And that's just a general tip as well. Like, if you interview for a job and you don't know a technology, I know that we're talking salary here, and you don't know it, when they ask you, just say, I'm really interested in it, but I haven't had the chance to learn it yet. I would love to learn it, and I'll be really interested in doing that in my in the period up to me starting a job. So it's definitely something I recommend. So the other thing as well, you might be told that benefits make up for a lower salary, and obviously you should actually consider this. Yes, it can be a tactic that people use, and one thing that does not make up the salary is stuff like company culture, because it's so intangible, right? But if it's a 4-day work week, that's a major one, right? That's worth a load of money. Or if they give you a company car, like obviously, I think that literally is benefit in kind. And certainly the tax man sees that as cash. But like consider the benefits package and consider how tangible it is. And then, if not, and if it isn't really something that's tangible, just explain that you prefer to have it as cash. You don't really have to go into reasons. Like you can just say, look, I've got a mortgage or I've got kids or whatever, I need the stability. Like, it doesn't matter. Like they don't have to, you don't really have to justify your reasons beyond saying like, look, I want stable money. Again, it's probably more something that happens in startups a little bit, but it's a very competitive market and recruiters are looking for a USP on their side as to like, how can we compete with less money? Because being a recruiter, speaking to someone who used to do it, it's not an easy job at all. So be nice to recruiters, as long as they're nice to you. It seems very challenging finding a job as a junior who's just about to graduate, not having 1 year of experience with React, JS, Python, whatever. I'm a bit hesitant to apply to those roles, even though I do like to work with JS and React and love and CSS. Yeah, it is tough because I absolutely know what you mean. And I've been looking at for entry-level jobs to post in my Discord to help people out that want to get their first job. And I really dislike these ones that say they're an entry-level job and actually they require 1 year's experience. I would suggest applying to them anyway, because the best way to think about it is they're looking for a wish list rather than must-haves. Even if they say it's must-haves, that it's a wish list. Like if you can prove that you can code at the level they need anyway, years of experience really don't matter. And it's the worst that can happen is that they say no. If you get to a technical interview, you get the great experience of doing a technical interview and you're only going to get better from there. So definitely apply. Like, don't just spray and pray. Like, make sure each application is a good application, but don't be put off by if they say, if you're a junior and they say, we want 1 year's experience. My first job, they would have I think they wanted a year's experience, but it was the kind of situation where I explained that, I didn't really have any experience, but give me a chance. And I did the technical interview and I came out at the level that they wanted. Although actually, it's a long story, but I actually messed it up quite badly, but I think they liked the way I worked through it or something. I don't know. I'm just glad that I ended up in the industry. But what I'm saying by that is you may feel like you're stumbling sometimes with it, but don't be afraid to apply. And the more interviews you do, the better you're going to get and the closer you're going to get to that job. So just as some general tips now as well. And actually that led inadvertently very nicely. I wasn't planning that. If you decide to look for a new job, do try and run multiple job applications simultaneously. So gives you a negotiation advantage. Last time I did it, I think I had a few at the same time that came up to final stage. It gives you a really clear mind in terms of like how you can weigh them off against each other versus if they're all at different stages, it's very difficult to tell. You get in the right frame of mind for interviews as well. So interviewing, it's like any kind of skill. Like if you haven't done something for a while, you're going to be worse at it. If you're consistently interviewing, you're going to be better. So if you're already in the flow, you're going to do better. And obviously you have a negotiation advantage if you're lucky enough to get to the point where you have multiple offers. You can say, well, Google have offered me X amount and Facebook offered me this amount. And then you just play all the big tech companies off against each other and you ride off into the sunset with a £1 million job offer. Your experience may vary. Also as well, just a little tip, just see if you can negotiate a 6-month pay review if they really won't budge. If you really like the job and you can afford to live on the salary they're offering, but you really like the job and you want to take it, then see if you can negotiate a 6-month pay review. I did that in recruitment jobs as well, where I liked the company, but I wanted to earn more money. So set out some clear, defined, smart targets, as corporate speak would have it, just see where you need to be at to justify that higher salary, and that's definitely something you can do. And 6 months and actually it's no time at all, and then you can be up more towards your target salary. And then as well, try to quantify the benefits of work-life balance with a financial value. So, for example, full remote working. what would you value that in your salary? Like, for example, for me, I value full remote working at worth like 20-25% of my salary. So it's really worth it for me. And everyone is totally different, and it could be very, very, very different for you. And there's all kinds of benefits, and I would strongly recommend checking them all out. Like I said, like, don't see them as an alternative to cash, but also do try and quantify them a little bit as money and see them that way. Like, what I mean by that is stuff like when companies tell you, oh yeah, we have fresh fruit, and then once a month we get pizza delivered. It's like, actually that's worth like 12 quid a month, which is like 100 quid a year, maybe 144 quid a year, which is, you know, it's almost nothing in terms of like an actual person's annual salary. So just that way you can really think about, okay, what benefits actually matter here? My pension, my life insurance, stuff like gym memberships, you know, stuff that actually has a decent financial value. But yeah, I think that more or less runs us to the end. For some reason, I've said AMA here instead of Q&A. Ask me anything, I guess, instead of questions and answers. So ask me anything, ideally about tech and salary negotiations, but if you want to ask about something else, go ahead. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining today. And if you've got any questions, I'd be more than happy to do my best, share my insight.
I can jump in there if nobody else wants to ask a question just yet. I was just wondering, because obviously we have a lot of fully remote roles at the moment. Is there any sort of recommendation for someone potentially like Annika, who's in Edinburgh, but there's probably higher paying fully remote roles in London, for example? Like, is that a tactic that people are using, or?
Well, I can't confirm or deny my tactics, but my company is headquartered in London and I live in Edinburgh. So make of that what you will. Cool. And but yeah, in terms of like, definitely that's something worth doing, especially if you don't mind traveling down to London like every few weeks. Personally, I see it as a benefit. I've spent, as you can tell from my accent, I spent a lot of time there. So I've got a lot of mates down there and stuff. So I actually just see it as almost a perk of the job. And I save money by living in Edinburgh. Question here: best way to negotiate a rise at the current company? Yeah, so that's a really good point. So a lot of those principles apply in terms of like value add. And I mentioned a brag sheet. Keep an internal brag sheet. Like, use something like Notion on your computer, which is really great because it syncs between all your devices. Use something like Notion, and then if something went really well, or if you solved like a bug at the last minute before a demo or something like that, or you just really help out the team, or you deliver something clutch, or you start a project and lead a project from start to finish, things like that, basically evidence that you have leveled up. Then you can take it into a pay review. And just generally as well, something to remember about that: in most companies, your manager's comp is tied to your comp. It is in their interest to make sure you get more money, because they will get more money. Everyone wins. So a good manager wants you to make more money because they will make more money and they will look better. Because if you think of it like management 2 levels up, if they say like, Alice is going for Alice is getting another pay rise because she's done really well. And Bob, the manager, is going to look great, right? Because clearly the management has meant that Alice has been able to flourish and get more money out of the company because she's added lots of value. To give a basic example, what should a developer with a year of experience be able to do? So a year is an interesting point. I would say you hit the weird inflection point at 18 months where the market forces kind of really swap between you suddenly become very in demand rather than having to chase the jobs. So a developer with a year's experience, I would say, hold on for 6 more months and then have an eye on the market. Like, you don't necessarily need to leave, but like your value will have increased a lot and your company should be aware of that. So definitely go to the company and explain, look, I'm not really that junior anymore and I'm adding a lot of value myself. So that's what I would advise you would do. And you say you've been there a year as well. A lot of companies have a mandatory pay review at a year. So definitely see if your company's got any kind of like mandatory review. Annika, I can see you've got your hand up again. Feel free.
Yeah, I think you kind of answered my question regarding the pay rise. wouldn't managers automatically assume that you do develop when you work for a company and that you get better with what you're doing?
See, yeah, well, they hire you for one job, right? So if you're meeting it, you're hired because you meet expectations, and then you're promoted once you exceed them. So that's the way I would frame it. It's like, I'm exceeding the level that you hired me at, and therefore I justify a higher price. Also, at the moment, you can just say inflation, I justify a higher price, but let's not get into politics and economics. But yeah, that's where I'd frame it. Like, keep in your head, I was hired because I meet expectations, and I'm going to get promoted because I'm going to exceed expectations. And they can't see you just exceeding your initial expectations as the expectation, and don't let them get away with that, basically. Cool. Has anyone got any more questions, or shall we leave it there? I think someone asked about the slides as well. I think I can give them give the slides to you, Hannah, if you want to email them out to the list. If anyone wants to find my content, I'll actually just put a link in here. We're on basically everything, so I'm struggling to actually. Oh, and I can't even spell my own my own link tree. 1 sec, sorry. Like typing. While trying to avoid my microphone. There we go. Yeah, so if you get on there, that'll give you all the links. The one in particular to look out for is our Discord server. So you can join that. It's like a free community where we do things like post jobs, we review each other's portfolios and projects. And it's just generally a really nice place for people that have got like 0 to 3 years experience mainly. But we also as well have a lot of like senior people that come in to help out, which is really nice as well. And generally, like, people are really friendly on there. And I think some of you are already on there, so do feel free to join if you haven't come across it yet.
Perfect. And I've just popped the link in there as well for Crew. We're just a crew.io. If anyone wants to sign up, and you can then keep up to date on any of our future free events. We've also do kind of some interviews with CTOs and things like that to try and be able to understand how they got to where they are in their career and what skills help them get there in different paths, and all of these kind of tips and tricks. So the first one will be coming out within a week or so. But thank you again, everybody, for joining. Thank you so much, Cam, as well. That was so useful. So it's such a helpful session. So we're really lucky to be able to pick your brain and extract all of that and be able to, everybody's going to go out and negotiate. Yeah, like you said, $1 million pay rises and yachts and everything, and hopefully we'll be invited to the parties that you have when you be able to negotiate those.
Absolutely. And yeah, I want to wish everyone who's currently looking for a new job the absolute best of luck. And just as I said before, just feel free to join my Discord if you want the moral support, or connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't already. But best of luck to everyone, particularly if you're looking for that first job. Stick with it. Once you get that first job, everything is so not uphill from there. Everything's great from there. Like it's definitely the hardest point of your tech career is getting the first job.
Yeah. Actually, just one last question, maybe, Cam. Is there any tips on, would you recommend anyone doing any kind of work on Fiverr or anything like that to be able to build up their CV while they're still studying?
Yeah, definitely a good idea. Take on some kind of freelance work for sure. Fiverr is a great one. Upwork as well. Also as well, just see if any of like friends or family just want a website doing. Is a great way to do it. Like someone on my Discord actually literally last night put up a link of what he did. His friend runs a small business. I think it's like We Buy Any Car but for motorbikes, I think. And he's just redone the whole website, and it looks absolutely fantastic. It looks like the sort of thing someone would pay thousands for. So his mate is a very lucky guy. But we're really encouraging the guy who made the website. You know, you've got to put that front and center on your CV and explain that it's a freelance assignment. So even if it's a thing for a friend or family, it doesn't matter if you're being paid or not. Try and get paid, or at least get them to take you out for dinner or something. But put it down as a freelance job, because you're making a commercial product for someone. So absolutely feel free to do it. I think one of my first projects was making a website for my brother's Depop shop. So, you know, there's all kinds of stuff you can do.
Amazing. Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a lovely evening, and you can connect with us on LinkedIn and follow up if you have any questions. I'll send on the slides and the link to the recording as well.